Good morning. I'm here with Jay Krushell, the co-founder of Treefort today. How are you doing, Jay?
I'm doing very well. Thank you.
Good. Thank you so much for taking the time to sit with us. I've been wanting to sit down and pick your brain for a while because I think what you guys are doing out in Alberta is very cool. To start, maybe could you share with us a little bit about your background, your area of practice, so we can get some context?
Yeah, happy to do it. I'm a partner at the law firm of Witten, which is an Edmonton-based law firm. We've got about 60 lawyers, and I practice primarily in the area of commercial lending. And what that means is if you were buying a commercial building in Edmonton for $8 million, you'd go to a bank, get a loan. As soon as you sign the commitment letter, they instruct me. What I do then is I produce the stack of paper. I get everybody to sign it. I do all of the registrations. I report to the bank, and then I move the money. That's what I do.
Perfect. So you mainly do lender representation then?
Yes, that's probably 80% of my practice.
Perfect. Okay, that's great. So I would imagine, and I know from our own practice that that has probably traditionally been a very paper heavy area of business.
Yeah, that's what motivated us to start going down this road, is because we realized how inefficient we were. And I have to tell you, it's incredibly frustrating because all of the banks have started the journey of digital ID for their clients to help them to make it so that people can open their bank accounts virtually. So in other words, you can open up a bank account without having to physically go into the branch. So the clients now are having this experience of dealing virtually with their banks. They're online banking. They're signing the commitment letters. And then as soon as the baton comes to us, we go back to 1981, where we're printing paper and curly fax machines. And so it's like our sector is literally 30 years behind the rest of the world. And that's the problem we're trying to solve.
Great. So that's a great segue into what you are doing. So you are the co-founder of a company called Treefort. Maybe you could explain a little bit about what is Treefort, why, in addition to what you just explained, which is pretty clear, especially to someone like me who deals with residential real estate transactions all the time. What is it? Why was it created? What is it? What does it do? What would you like it to do? What are the objectives?
So from a 30,000 foot level, we basically have two objectives. The first is to put tools into the hands of lawyers that will help us do a better job of preventing fraud. And the collateral benefit of doing that is to provide a higher level of service to our clients, because society is moving very quickly to the digital experience. People are doing things on their phones. And we as lawyers are in a service industry, and I believe that we have to provide the services that society is asking for. So from a high level, that's what we're doing. Take it down to the 5,000 foot level. What we're trying to do is modernize the practice of law. In working with the law societies, we've come to the conclusion that all of the practices, all of the procedures that we have in place are really there to accomplish three objectives. The first is to make sure that we identify conclusively who the human being is we're dealing with. The second is to protect the integrity of the documents we're dealing with. In other words, making sure they haven't been manipulated and changed. And the third is to ensure confidentiality with our clients. So historically, think pre-internet, the only way a lawyer could do that was to have the client come to the office, sit down in a boardroom with a closed door, sign a piece of paper. The lawyer would take immediate custody of the paper. That's how we did it. And those are the legacy systems that have carried over to 2020. And so the company, what we're doing is we're introducing the technologies that will allow lawyers to achieve those three base objectives in the digital world.
That's a great background. So essentially, up until today, the way that, let's just start with the first pillar of what you're trying to do, which is identifying and verifying the client in a secure way.
Yeah.
So up until today, lawyers across the country have been meeting with their clients in person in order to meet those ends.
Yeah.
And I think we can all say that that's certainly a way to do it, but by no means is that a foolproof way.
Yeah.
What you're attempting to do, would that actually assure sort of a superior level of security in terms of IDing clients? And if so, how would you be going about that?
Yeah. Now, Lena, forgive me because I'm going to give you a bit of a long-winded answer to that question because I feel like I need to give a bit of context.
Sure.
And then to lead up to the answer, so I apologize. So first of all, specific real world problem. I'm working on a commercial loan file. I have to have 4 people sign the documents. Turns out that when everything's ready, one of them's down in Phoenix. And we had a situation in my office, would have been 2 winters ago, it was right before Christmas, where a lawyer in my office was working on a very big transaction. It was supposed to close the beginning of December. Of course, things ran late. We were up against the Christmas break deadline. The deal had to close. One of the people who had to sign a guarantee started the family vacation. They were down in Phoenix. And because of the last minute of it, what they ended up doing, they had to fly back to Edmonton to sign the document because it was so important that this transaction didn't get delayed. And so that's an extreme example of the real world problem we're trying to solve. We don't want our clients to have that kind of inconvenience and cost to complete their transactions. Now, the bit of context to this, as you know, we as lawyers are all subject to rules from the Law Society that govern what we must do to identify our clients. And here, a bit of background on all of this. After 9/11, what happened was the international community did a bit of a debrief on what happened. And one of the things that they discovered was that the bad guys had penetrated or infiltrated our banking systems, and they laundered their money. And that's how they got the cash to perpetrate that terrorist act. So I think it was 17 countries got together, created an international organization called FATA, F-A-T-A. And for the life of me, I can never remember what the acronym stands for. But what that organization did is it created a bunch of rules, standards to help make it harder for bad guys to launder money. Canada signed on to that treaty. FinTrack rose out of that. And now we've got the system for reporting entities, mainly banks, to try to identify suspicious transactions. What happened was the international body came and did an audit of Canada to see how we were doing complying with our treaty obligations. And we got a failing grade. What happened is these people went and said, listen, you Canadians, this is bad because you've got trillions of dollars moving through lawyers' trust accounts and you, government, don't have eyes on that. And that's so bad. So what the federal government did is they attempted to amend the FinTrack regulations to make lawyers reporting entities. So in other words, require us to report transactions to FinTrack. The Federation of Law Societies and a couple of other bodies took that to the Supreme Court, arguing you can't do that because it's a fundamental breach of solicitor-client privilege. And the lawyers won.
Wow.
But what happened was, I think, and this is my own assumptions, but I believe that the Law Society said, okay, listen, we know that we're all on the same page here. We all want to stop the bad guys from perpetrating frauds. And I think the Law Societies knew that the federal government was going to come at this from another angle because they had to comply with these international treaties. So what the Law Societies did was they went to the federal government and they said, okay, guys, listen, here's what we'll do. We'll impose the exact same rules that you impose on banks for KYC. We'll impose those same rules on lawyers. You can't have access to lawyers' trust accounts, but you'll have the comfort of knowing that the lawyers have to do the exact same things that banks did. Everybody said, cool. And what happened, I believe, is that Law Societies basically copied the FinTrack rules and pasted them in our rules. Great. But the problem was nobody ever thought about the practical application of those rules in the legal sector. So we have this great set of rules that say, for example, we can access credit histories, but practically speaking, there was no way that lawyers can actually do it. There's no law firm that could actually right now call up Equifax and say, hey, listen, here's the name, address, date of birth of my client. Tell me whether it matches it physically can't be done. So to get to the answer to your question, what we're doing is we're putting the technology in place, that connector piece. On the one hand, you've got these reliable sources that lawyers are now able to draw upon. We've got lawyers, but there's a void right now. Lawyers physically cannot actually access those services. So what the Treefort platform is doing is it's the connection that allows lawyers to get in there. And then the specific answer to your question is that I believe that the actual science and shows and proves conclusively that when lawyers have access to those tools, we can do an infinitely better job of those fundamental things in identifying the human beings we're dealing with, ensuring the integrity of the documents, and ensuring confidentiality. One last stat I'll leave you with, Lena, and I don't remember the exact numbers, but there's scientific studies out there that have tested how good we are at matching like a person's face to their ID. And it's something like an untrained person gets it wrong about 40% of the time.
Wow.
And a trained person, like a border guard or an immigration person, still gets it wrong. I think it was about 15% of the time. But the computers with the facial recognition are accurate 99.99% of the time. And please, anybody who's watching this, I don't have the exact numbers, but that's the scale of the differences. And so what I firmly believe is that if we as lawyers can utilize those technologies, we can just do a better job of fulfilling our legal obligations.
Absolutely. That's fascinating. I'd actually love to take a look at that study if we can dig it up. That's great. So, I mean, so what you're talking about is not, hey, I'm going to take the rules that are already in place, the way lawyers are already doing things, and I'm going to just simply make it more efficient. What you're saying is, I'm not only going to make it more efficient so it's easier for us, cheaper for the client, but I'm going to make it way better.
Well, no, actually, the way I would put it, Lena, is I'm saying we're going to make it happen. So you can imagine I'm an 8-year-old boy. It's Christmas Eve. I'm on Main Street. I've got my nose pressed up against the glass of the department store window, and I can see the presents on the other side, but I can't get to them. That's the situation we have right now. And what we're saying is we're going to open the door so that you can actually get in and get access to those presents.
Right.
Right now, the door is locked for lawyers. We're literally going to turn the key, open it up so that lawyers can actually start using those tools for the first time.
That's great, because right now we're relying on a methodology that has, up to a 40% error rate.
Exactly.
Now, I know up until recently with, the whole sort of COVID scenario in Ontario anyhow, the identification or the verification of identification of clients, there were a lot of rules surrounding that, some of which said that we had to ID our clients in a face-to-face manner. Obviously, it wasn't defined. People defined it differently depending on their level of comfort with technology and their level of comfort with risk. That has changed now during COVID in Ontario anyhow, where Law Society said that we are permitted to do this virtually. I don't know about the other provinces, but where does this technology land in the midst of these rules, I guess, across Canada? And, I don't see it reverting back, certainly in Ontario, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure. So here's my take. So the way I look at it is pre-COVID, the standard was here. We had to meet with clients in person. This was the standard. And then what happened with COVID and our inability to meet with clients in person, what happened was the courts, the law societies, governments relaxed the rules. They lowered the bar to here just to keep the systems moving forward. But everybody, our insurers, governments, law societies, is very concerned about this because they don't want to make it easier for bad guys. So the way I'm looking at this is post-COVID, there's one of two things that's going to happen. The bar is not going to stay here. That's impossible. And so the natural reaction would be to go back to where it was. And the only way we can change that is to show the decision makers that the technology now exists that will allow us to raise the bar to here. And when they see that we can do this, then I think that's what's going to happen. We're going to go from where we are today up to here, and we're past what we were doing before. And so I believe that the challenge and what we're focused on is doing things like this, getting the word out, making sure that the people that are making these very important decisions are aware of the technologies that exist, how they work, what they can do and what they can't do. So when they're making decisions, for example, about how a will in Ontario will be signed in 2024, they can know how what's possible, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. So the current status in Alberta is what? Are you allowed to currently ID your clients virtually?
Yeah. Last week, so across the country, and I've got the research, any of the people that are watching this, I'm happy to share. We've been tracking everything that's going on across the country, and everybody's basically moving. Every province has made relaxations, but the provinces are doing it in different ways.
Yeah.
Alberta, I did a deal last week where we acted for a family who was buying a residential rental property, refinancing a second residential rental property, and putting a first mortgage on a third one. How the systems work, I was able to do that on a video call. We were able to identify them, sign all of the documents virtually. But it's a real mishmash of the way we do it is really not great, but it works. We can do it. And at the end of the call, my clients told me that they really appreciated having the option of being able to do this because they were scattered all over Northern Alberta. And the difficulty for them, even ignoring COVID, the difficulty for them to get into my office altogether was a real inconvenience. And so we can do it right now. But the problem is, once again, what we're doing is we're holding up our driver's licenses like this.
Yeah.
And I can tell you with absolute certainty that that is the single worst way to identify a person that you couldn't think, but it's the only thing that we have available right now. So with the ID technology, by putting this in place, what we will do is, like I say, go from here to here.
That makes a lot of sense. And I mean, I can certainly attest to that. We do tons of real estate, and that's a situation we're always running into. So right now, in Ontario, and our firm specifically, we're able to do all of our transactions completely virtually. The only time we're running into a snag, and certainly not as well as we could be if we had technology like yours.
Yeah.
100%. And that's one of the reasons that I'm so interested in talking to you about your project. But currently, one of the roadblocks that we still face is we will have lenders who, despite the fact that we're legally permitted to do this by several means, they are just saying, you know what? We're lending the money. We're not going to lend it unless we have a wet ink signature. And well, we have clients who live up in, Moose Factory or wherever, and, they can't get a document commissioned. And if they can, it's going to cost them $2,000 because we're going to have to fly someone in. It's just, that is the roadblock. Are you seeing the same thing in Alberta?
Yeah, absolutely. It's across the country. And this is the crazy part about this, Lena. The banks are actually leading the charge on digital identity.
Yes.
They're the ones that invested in Secure Key. They are the ones who have set up this whole infrastructure with the Verify.me platform that you can use to confirm whether or not someone has an account with a Canadian financial institution. But their sole focus at the moment is on virtual account openings because that's their friction point. Gotcha. So on the one hand, you have the banks who've created this technology. They're pioneering the use of the technology on the front end, but they won't let us use it on the back end.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we're doing is, in my view, what we're doing is not a technological problem. What we're dealing with here is a political problem. And it's connecting with the right people and convincing them that this is something worth doing. And right now, the courts have been on board. The law societies have been actively engaged with us. The provincial governments across the country are making announcements about post-COVID virtual signings. It's the banks. And one of the things that we're doing very actively right now is using every connection and every resource that we've got to connect, because all we need is one. As soon as we get one, they'll all follow like lemmings. And it
Absolutely.
may be that it's going to be one of the private lenders that's going to take up the baton on this because they're a little more flexible, a little more entrepreneurial. But we don't have any announcements to make on that side. But I'm hoping the next time we talk, we can tell you that we'll be in a pilot project with a major financial institution to test this technology and design those virtual workflows so that your client in Northern Ontario can sign those mortgage documents virtually.
That would be amazing. I mean, I can say as someone who sees these transactions happen every day, that would be a game changer. And as I said, we have great ways of doing it right now, but the way you are suggesting, it's just, I mean, it's a whole nother universe, which is excellent.
Yeah, so Lena, one thing there, I have to jump in on this and talk about the 800-pound gorilla in the room here.
Yes.
If that's okay. So what you and I are talking about is technology, and all of that's exciting and it's great, and I could talk for hours. But here's the thing. When this technology is launched in the next couple of months, I firmly believe it will be the equivalent of dropping the atom bomb on the legal profession. And the reason I say that is because I believe that one of the pieces of glue that holds the current legal business model together is the requirement for physical proximity meetings. So in other words, if somebody's buying a house in Calgary, they're not going to retain me in Edmonton to act for them because they don't want to drive to Edmonton to sign the documents.
Yeah.
They're going to hire a Calgary lawyer because it's convenient for them to drive and meet with that lawyer. Once this virtual meeting technology is in place, and it's absolutely inevitable, what's going to happen is it's going to totally disrupt the legal profession. And that's why I believe there's certain sectors of our profession that are actively opposed to this. Once again, please, this is my opinion, take it with a grain of salt, but every time I have heard people talk about their opposition to remote signings, they cloak it in the guise of public interest, but really what it is self-protection.
Yes.
In my opinion, it's people who are worried about their practices and maintaining their income, which is a legitimate concern. But what I believe is that our job as a profession is to provide legal services to society. And the decisions we make must be made in the best interests of society. And if we're not able to provide all of the legal needs to people by this physical proximity meeting, then we must change. And so, Lena, if you can envision a situation 2 years from now when you and the people in your office could basically meet with anybody anywhere, you could be doing house deals in Edmonton or Labrador or Northwest Territories. You will get, what's going to happen is, I believe, the lawyers who are proactive and adaptive will take this up. And you're going to have firms that are super firms who are going to go from doing 200 residential files a month to doing 2,000. And you're going to have lawyers in every province. And here's the other thing is, I believe that if we don't do this, FCT will. And let's be honest, because once again, society is moving. And if we as a profession aren't able to provide the services that society is asking for, FCT or somebody else will. And it's actually not a knock on FCT. I believe that they're on the right track. They are. And so once again, to be clear, there will be people watching this who will say, Jay, you must stop what you're doing. This is evil. And I get what they're saying. But what I'm telling everybody who might be watching this is, you cannot hold back the tide. This is happening, and you can either embrace it or you will be irrelevant. My opinion.
I love it. I love the passion. And this, the approach to, I'd say the approach of, let's not change because it's in the public interest not to. Whereas what we're really doing is exercising a form of protectionism. This is nothing new in the illegal industry. This is nothing new, period. This has been around way longer than either of us, and I don't think it's going away anytime soon. But I wholeheartedly agree. And I mean, I've seen sort of this pattern again and again and again. And I think what's nice is I certainly have spoken to and met with and been involved with a lot of lawyers and law firms who are of the same mind as you, who really are excited about the changes that technology are allowing. And it's not just, as I said earlier, it's not just a function of making things more efficient so we can make more money. It's actually saying, we're gonna start fixing some of these problems that have been around. Everybody knows that there is fraud in real estate. Yeah. Everybody know, and again, I'm just talking about real estate here, but everybody knows that fraud has existed in real estate since real estate started. And what you're doing is you're saying, hey, I've got a solution that not only makes this more efficient, probably cheaper for clients, better for lawyers, but it actually makes it way more secure. I can fix this problem. Yeah. You're gonna tell me it's in the best interest of society that I don't? Really?
Yeah. Well, and actually, Lena, I apologize. There's one other thing I should mention to give context to everybody who's watching this. So I started down this journey to solve a particular problem I was encountering in my practice, because I want to build my practice. I want to get more business. What happened was I ended up connecting with the Law Society of Alberta. And I will say that the Law Society of Alberta, I believe, is one of the most active or proactive law societies in Canada, because I went to them and I said, listen, we have a problem here. I think that we can provide solutions. And they said, okay, let's work together on this. So what happened was last summer, I signed a pilot project agreement with the Law Society of Alberta. And basically what the agreement says is that we cooperatively are going to identify technologies, test them, evaluate them, and if the technologies, do what we think they are, or do what they say they're going to do, we'll make them available to the entire legal profession. So what we're doing, to be clear, this isn't Jay Krushell, lawyer at Witten doing something. This isn't just Jay Krushell business trying to do something for a specific group. The deal that we have with the Law Society is we have to get these tools into the hands of everybody in the legal profession. Yeah. So this is an open door. Anybody who, and what I feel in some small ways that we're contributing to the betterment of our profession, because we're doing all the legwork, we're doing the grunt work, we're solving problems. And then when the platform's up and running, we're going to make it available to any lawyer or notary across the country that wants it. Yeah. And so this is a real, and I believe this in my heart of hearts, this is lawyers helping lawyers and legal tech, lawyers finding solutions for lawyers. And that's important. And the other thing I should mention is that in our journey, we've engaged with all of the major law societies across Canada, except for Quebec and BC, including the Federation of Law Societies, are all observers in our pilot project. And I can tell you that I got calls from almost all of them when COVID started to ask me if our product was up and running yet. So I want to just tip my hat a little bit to the law societies, because at least in this instance, they have been very receptive to the possibility of change.
That's amazing. I love it. And I love the fact that you're really incorporating everybody into this. One of the things I was going to mention earlier, and I know we're totally over time right now, but that's okay. We'll wrap it up in a minute. One of the things I was going to mention is I know that, COVID has definitely kind of thrown jet fuel on this whole process. Things that we thought were going to be happening, certainly in our business, and I know it's the same for you, in 2 years are happening now. And we are just, okay, how do we get ahead of this? How do we create solutions now that we thought we were going to be creating in 750 days or 800 days or whatever it is? Yeah. So one of the things I know in Ontario anyhow, I've been extremely impressed with how adaptive and responsive our Attorney General's office has been. And they are actively putting together working groups and looking at making legislative changes. And I know that the other provinces are doing this too. And what I would love to see, truly what I would love to see, is the provinces working together rather than, all in our own bubbles and saying, okay, you're going to look at exactly the same thing in Alberta that we're doing in Ontario. And certainly we can all have our own legislation. We know that that's the way it needs to happen, but we should be working together and putting together the best minds and saying, hey, we all have the same concerns. We all want to reach the same objectives. Why don't we work together and come up with the best legislation that we can? And it will go much quicker and it will be better.
Yeah. And so to that end, I can't give specifics right now, but hopefully the next time we talk in a couple of weeks, I'll be able to give you the specifics of an arrangement we're working on. Let's just call it a proof of concept that would involve all of the major stakeholders. Because to your point, post-COVID, when we're meeting with people virtually, and we're basically, borders will be irrelevant. And if we don't synchronize or at least coordinate, almost like our personal property legislation across the country. So if it's not at least designed to be work across borders, then the whole system will fail. We might as well put up walls.
Yeah, agreed.
And so I'm hoping that whatever comes out of post-COVID will be something that's coordinated.
Absolutely. And that's actually, again, a great segue into sort of my last question, unless there's anything else you wanted to cover. This is kind of a big question to end with, but what more do you think can be done right now? And I know there's a million things we could do, but as a matter of priority, what do you sort of see as the largest priorities that we and let's just call it a country, we should be focusing on?
Specifically on the digital ID space?
I would say specifically on the how do we make real estate services in general more secure and able to use platforms like Treefort? Like, what type of legislative changes do you think that we could look at making, or what type of efforts could we be making to meet these ends?
So here's my perspective on it. I believe that what needs to happen is this proof of concept, because this is new to everybody. Maybe it would be like autonomous driving vehicles, right? If you're a government and you want to try to figure out how to write rules governing the use of automated vehicles on the road, you have to understand the technology. None of us knows how this is going to work or what it's going to look like. I believe what needs to happen next is we need to have large-scale trials of these technologies where we all watch, see how they work, test them in a very safe environment, and so that we can get data. So that when we have the data, we can make informed decisions on what legislation needs to look like. As opposed to governments making decisions, or law societies, or our insurers making decisions in an information vacuum. Because if you don't know, for example, that a transporter exists, you're going to build highways. But if you can see that there's a transporter, you understand how the technology works, and that you can just go, beam me up, Scotty, then you build transporter pads. And so I believe that that's the next step. And what I'm hoping to accomplish, and the invitation is out to anybody watching, to participate in these trials. We need lawyers. We need insurance people. We need banks. We need land titles people. We need people in the private sector, the Interact guys, the Secure Key guys, all of those bodies working together to design these trials and then test them and then make the evidence available to everybody. That's what I'm hoping to do next.
Oh, that's great, Jay. That's wonderful. I really appreciate you going through this. And I know this is the type of subject where we literally could probably do this 20 times and we'd still have things to talk about, because every topic we touch on is a topic in and of itself. But this was a great sort of overview to start. And I think, a little bit easier to understand for someone who this might be new for, because this is new to everyone. It's just varying degrees of newness. But thank you very much, Jay. Really appreciate you taking the time to chat today. And I think, I think we're going to see so many changes in the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months that may be due for another catch up in a few months or so.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Wonderful. Well, have a great afternoon.